All right. Hey, everyone. This is a brand new podcast I'm thinking about doing. So, still working out a bunch of bugs, but what I want to do is basically take different auctions I do throughout the year and then analyze them by parts too. So, have like part one, the first 24 players, normally part two, kind of the middle of the auction, and then part three, a conclusion. And some of the guys are a little bit cheaper, like the $5 less type guys. So, anyways, we're going to go over this fantasy football auction after action report. My name is Eric Ludwig. You can follow me at FF_Gooch on Twitter. I don't want this thing go. There we go. Fantasy, I told you there's going to be some bugs. Fantasy football slow auction. This is a 10 baby 3, so at least it can be found on dataforceff.com. And they run these best ball and draft master leagues from around like February timeframe through July. And they're kind of a good way to get some auctions under you. It is a slow auction, so there's only 12 players that are nominated and bid on each day. Like I said, this is part one, so there's a strategy in first 24. This draft went from February 23rd to March 4th. So keep in mind, there's a lot of things that happened before this draft concluded, like the Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham trades. Those happened after this thing started. Le'Veon Bell signed with the Jets. That happened after this thing started. And a bunch of other like free agent signings. So some of these things, like if you see Rob Gronkowski, so he retired after this league was done. So if you see something like that, prices might not be what they will be later in the year. This is a 12-team draft master, so there's no trades, lineups, waivers, etc. So DataForce runs these leagues. They have draft master and they have best ball. The best ball is a little bit different than what best ball is in other leagues. The best ball drafts that they do on DataForce, you can do one waiver move each week. So just one, no more than one, which is kind of cool because if you have like a player who retires like Gronk did or a player that gets hurt, they're out for the entire year, you can go on the free agent market and get somebody else to kind of replace that player. The big difference is Draft Master, you get to draft 24 players. With the best ball, you only draft 18. This is Draft Master. It's PPR scoring, and starting lineup is a QB, 2 RBs, 3 wide receivers, tight end, a flex, a kicker, and a defense. Each team has a $200 budget, and once again, Draft Master, so it's 24 players in each team. 1 player is nominated by each team each day. So again, there's only 12 players that are nominated each day and 12 players that are bid on each day. Players are up for bid for 24 hours. You'll see the high bid for the last hour, and that's it. So it's kind of blind bidding up until that point, but the last hour, you can see what the high bid is. So some of the assumptions going into this year, people will spend way too much for Mahomes. I think that's going to happen again and again and again. Mahomes is great, but you're basically going to be paying like quite a bit. So you're probably looking at 30 or more in most drafts, and that's kind of crazy. Even last year, so Watson and Rodgers were kind of the big ticket items in quarterback, and you're spending like 24 and 25. I thought that was too high last year, so anything above 30 is just kind of crazy for Mahomes. The top running backs will go for $55 to $65, and I think you're going to see the top 6 or 8 running backs will drive wide receiver prices down. So you'll be able to get, if you can wait a little bit on wide receivers, you should be able to get some pretty good deals. So I kind of said that massive values for 2 to 3 wide receivers among the top 10. And it's probably not going to be the first or second wide receiver nominated, but when you start getting to your 5th and 6th wide receiver nominated, people are going to be out of money, so you're going to get some pretty good deals. People will pay too much for the top defense. That happens almost every year. I wouldn't pay more than $3, maybe $4 for a top defense. That's it. Someone will blow their budget early. Happens in almost every draft. And someone will wait too long and have money left over. I don't know how long I've been doing auctions, but I think there's been like once or twice where I actually had money left over, but I would much rather go broke than have money left over. So for me, I mean, it changes a little bit for everybody, but basic strategies and concepts, I think there's 3 basic plans. You can go hyper fragile running back, so spend the majority of your budget on 2 to 3 expensive running backs, and then kind of fill in with some cheaper wide receivers, and then maybe get 1 or 2 running backs that are like $2 to $5 type guys. Modified zero RB. I'm kind of a fan of the zero RB strategy when it comes to regular snake drafts, but in auctions, you don't really have to do zero RB to make it work. You can get 4 to 5 really good wide receivers and still get a really good running back, like a top 5-round type running back, like I don't know, Dalvin Cook might be in that kind of area, or Sony Michel, somebody like that. So you can still get a pretty good running back and get those wide receivers, or target a top 3 tight end. So this year there's a clear top 3 tight end, and they're going to be pretty expensive. So if you're targeting a top 3 tight end, you kind of have to adjust your strategy likewise. So one of the things I like to do is nominate QBs early. Sometimes I'll nominate a QB that I like, but I can live without, like Ben Roethlisberger. I've kind of done this for years now. Is a guy that if I can get him pretty cheap, then that's pretty awesome. But I don't mind if somebody overpays for him. I like nominating Mahomes pretty early this year, just because I think people are going to spend so much for him. I always look for value. It seems kind of obvious, but sometimes you get really, especially in the beginning phases, get really into it. And you see all these top wide receivers going. You have to be patient. Just kind of wait for the value because it'll happen. And of course, like, you know, it's kind of hard to do it every single time. I end up failing in some spots. I think there were some players that I definitely would have paid up for if I kind of been a little bit more patient for this draft. Small budget for QBs. I like using, especially because it's Draft Master, a platoon strategy. So getting about 3 quarterbacks and not spending too much for them. Maybe spending like $9 for my top quarterback and then, I don't know, like $5 and $2 for the other ones. So it's kind of a late round quarterback strategy. So I won't go for somebody like Mahomes or Rodgers or anything like that this year. So in this draft, the first 12 nominations, no surprise here, Saquon Barkley is first one, followed by Zeke. Patrick Mahomes is kind of funny. I think I was the 10th person to nominate in this one, and I had Patrick Mahomes in my queue to nominate, and somebody beat me to it. Right after that is Baker Mayfield, then Deshaun Watson, Rob Gronkowski, George Kittle, Cortland Sutton, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Joe Mixon, and then we got a kicker. Kickers count too. So you can see, like, this is really unusual, and I don't think you'll see this very often, but 3 QBs were nominated back to back to back. That's unusual, and I actually think you'll see it later, but I actually think it drove down the price of Mahomes a little bit because, especially with these quarterbacks, you see Mayfield and Watson are really kind of hot ticket items. So I think that kind of kept the price of Mahomes down. That was unusual. And then, so George Kittle was nominated early. So George Kittle, any of those 3 tight ends, whichever one's nominated earliest is going to kind of anchor that price to the top 3 tight ends. So you figure, like, if Kittle's nominated early, then, you know, the other 2 are probably going to be within about $5 of him. And these are the actual prices that came up. So Saquon Barkley went for 64. No surprise there. I think that's probably what his average auction value is going to be in most leagues. Zeke went for 55. I thought that was a really good deal. The person who I never would have won him, but I certainly would put in a bid of like 58 for Zeke. I think that's fine. The person that won him actually put in a bid of 60. So no matter what, they would have won that. But 55 is a pretty good price. Patrick Mahomes went for 27. The interesting thing about that is that the person who put in the top bid actually bid up to $60. It's just that nobody met him on that bid, obviously. So even though his value was 27, which I thought was actually a decent value, he could have easily been far more expensive. And I think in most leagues, you're going to see him go for, like I said, mid-30s. We'll see how that evens out. Baker Mayfield went after that 14. Not bad. Deshaun Watson for 16. Watson is a guy that I love targeting, but you know, in most leagues you're probably going to see him go for like $8 to $10 somewhere in there. It just so happened he got nominated early, went for 16, so I was pretty well priced out of that one. Gronk went for $9, so it seems kind of crazy now that he's retired, of course. But again, this draft happened before he retired. I still thought that even then, I thought the $9 price was too expensive. You're almost assuming at that point that he plays a full year, that he comes back, and just a lot of assumptions with that. I thought that was too expensive even at the time. And of course, now it looks downright silly now that he's retired. George Kittle went for 30, so again, that kind of anchored that tight end price. Cortland Sutton for 7, that's fine. Alvin Kamara, 55. I thought that was another pretty good deal. James Conner, 39. I'm not such a big James Conner fan this year. I loved him last year, and I think he's a pretty good talent. Obviously, he's on a good team, but I think that Pittsburgh offense is going to take a pretty big step back this year. And, you know, he had injury concerns last year, and I don't know. I just don't trust him at that price. But the Joe Mixon at 36, I would take that all day. I didn't get him, but I thought that was a pretty good price. And then the kicker went for 3, whatever. The next 12 nominations there, Kenyon Drake, Christian McCaffrey, Zach Ertz, Benny Snell Jr., the rookie running back, Todd Gurley, Doug Baldwin, Aaron Rodgers, Elijah McGuire, Michael Thomas, Le'Veon Bell, Jason Witten, and the Chicago Bears. Keep in mind, again, this started February 23. Figured it's probably like February 26. Jason Witten just announced that he was joining Dallas, so I think there was a little bit of hype with him. And we'll get to some prices here. So Kenyon Drake went for 9. I think that's fine, especially it's actually a really good price in the beginning of the draft. This happened before free agency. So I think some people kind of assumed that Miami would do something and add to the running back stable, but he's a pretty big winner in free agency. So far, so good with him. Christian McCaffrey went for 68. So that is higher than what Saquon Barkley went for. Kind of weird that happened, but he's one of the last kind of top tier running backs. So I think the horseshoe effect came into play. That's something the Fantasy Auctioneers podcast are famous for talking about, the horseshoe effect, where you have the first running back nominated in a tier, and they go for whatever amount. The second one goes for a little bit less, and then all of a sudden you get to the end of the tier, the prices jump up again. I think maybe that's what happened. Zach Ertz for 33, it's about what we expected. Benny Snell for $4. So one of the strategies, especially before the draft, is to get some of these rookie running backs before they find a team. Because once they find a team and things are a little bit more obvious, sometimes you get some really good values out of that. I thought in this case, though, I didn't really like it. I don't really like Benny Snell very much as a prospect anyways. I don't think he has quite what's going to take to be a primary running back, whatever team he goes to. So $4, it's not going to kill that team. I just wouldn't do that. I wouldn't want to take up a roster spot with him, but that's just me. Todd Gurley went for 61. Doug Baldwin for 14. This is before all the news came out about needing surgery and all that kind of stuff. Aaron Rodgers went for 19. Not bad, but more than I would pay. Elijah McGuire for 5. I like McGuire a lot. I was getting him in a lot of different spots. I didn't get him here for 5, but now, of course, that was before the Bell went to New York Jets, so that move is looking pretty bad. Michael Thomas went for 50. Le'Veon Bell for 44. Given the news, I thought that was a pretty good deal at the time. I thought that was too expensive. I thought there was a chance that he would sit out the entire year. Didn't really know what team he was going to, so that ended up being a deal for that team that got him. Jason Witten for 5. I think that's too much. Again, it's not so much that it kills your team, but $5 actually goes a long way in the later stages of the draft, so you want to save that money. Jason Witten should have been a $1 or $2 type guy. Chicago Bears for 11. That's outrageous. That's way too much for defense. I think $4 for the top defense is somewhat reasonable, but 11 is just way too expensive. So that might be a good early nomination target. So this is what the early draft board looks like. You can see my team, Gooch. I kind of hit everybody else's names so you can see it. And the interesting thing is, so for the first 24 players, 4 teams didn't draft a single player. I thought the price was just a little bit too high. You had one team that started off with Saquon Barkley and Zeke back-to-back. They also got Deshaun Watson and Doug Baldwin. So they went spending crazy right away. I think they spent, almost $140 within the first couple days of this draft. Team 9 there, you see him with Patrick Mahomes at 27. Not a horrible deal, a little bit more than I want to pay. They followed that up by getting Baker Mayfield for 14. So right there, just with those 2 quarterbacks, they invested $41 of their $200 budget in those 2 players, and that's way too much. George Kittle for 30 is fine. They got their kicker for 3. Christian McCaffrey for 68. I think that was a bit of a reach there. So that person, again, they spent about $140, and I think that was too much, just too much there. Team 11 get Gronk and Witten. I think they overpaid for both of those guys. James Conner kind of mentioned that. I do like Joe Mixon and Kenyon Drake. That wasn't too bad, but that's, I think, too much to spend for the first 24 players on some of those players. Team 12, who'd they get? So Cortland Sutton for 7. It's all right. Alvin Kamara for 55 is good. Zach Ertz for 33. Benny Snell. So I like Team 12. I'm not a big fan of Benny Snell, but it was only $4, so it didn't kill them. Of the people here, I don't know. I don't know which team I like their start, but I think Team 4 and Team 11 and 12 just went too crazy, spending too early. Team 9 certainly a little bit too crazy, so you want to have more of a balanced approach. Let's see. So that's basically part 1. Those are the first 24 players. You kind of see that some of the values and some of my thinking with that. I do have part 2. It's actually already written, so I just have to do the podcast. But I have to get on the board, so eventually I'm going to start getting players. I think the values can start rolling in pretty soon. We'll see some crazy prices with the next one, see some bargains, and kind of see team strategies and how it works out. So was it a good idea to come out of gun and spend up $140, or was it not? Would they have been better off waiting a little bit? So that's it. If you guys have any feedback, please leave it. I haven't even really come up with a name for this podcast. I'm just kind of experimenting with different technology to see what works early in the season, and I should have this pretty well nailed down after like 3 or 4 of these. So any suggestions, please let me know. Appreciate it. Have a good one.